So if you're making a presentation and you need some pictures, then you can just do a Google search and look up pictures and add them to a presentation. And using them for educational purposes, you don't have to worry about copyright issues. Just don't publish anywhere other than classroom pages, or you can cite the picture. Real quick, I want to go back to this previous slide about the tool and the visual hands-on approach that was used, and I wanted to look at a couple of the reflection post comments about that. And one of the statements was, so the question again, how does the main character teach his colleagues what he wants them to learn? Coach West said he uses a round table approach that is cooperative learning techniques, or a cooperative learning technique. And Ms. Hicks Bailey said that he asks questions and then gives out hands-on items. The colleagues are now involved in the learning process. And I love that comment. I love the comment about the round table and being involved in the learning process, because the kids need to be involved in the learning process. They need to own it. And techniques like these are ways that you help them own the learning. So I wanted to just interject that real quick and make sure I got those comments. Okay, so visual aids are research-based accommodation that help all students. We know that if we see something, we're more likely to remember more of that than when we hear something. And a comment that was made on that was made by Mr. Ennis. And he said, humans tend to retain what they see more than what they hear. Commercials are a good example of that. The announcer usually repeats the number at least 7 times. And remember, it was said that people need to hear something in between 7 and 12 times for them to actually remember it. So saying it once isn't going to be as impactful as a picture. So how much information, according to this visual here, how much information do students retain the first minute of class? And then by what percentage is that retention increased by the use of visual aids? So they retain about 70% of what they hear in the first 10 minutes, and then during the last 20 minutes, they only remember about 20%. But with visual aids, the retention is increased from 14 to 38%. So really helping them with more comprehension. And this is one of the supports that you can use, one of the accommodations that is STAR for SPED 504, let visuals just increase comprehension and significantly aid students. So why are they so important in the classroom? And I think that's the comment that I just read from Mr. Ennis. Another comment, I think that was it. So a lot of really good reflections, though, just the fact that pictures help us remember and retain, and we process them more easily. So develop vocabulary. Literacy supports comprehension, not just in reading, but also in conversation and when listening to presentations. Building vocabulary is an essential part of the education we give our students. No matter what subject you teach, everyone teaches vocabulary, reading and writing. Everybody teaches that. So here is Marzano's 6-step process. And this was from the Seidlitz book. In Building Academic Vocabulary, Marzano outlines a comprehensive approach to learning the content-specific academic vocabulary, or BRIC words, that students encounter in their reading. And we know that in order for students to have comprehension, they have to understand those brick-and-mortar words. So here is the 6-step process. You introduce it without a dictionary. You have the students restate it in their own words. You have nonverbal, such as drawings, or here you have draw, doodle, sketch, or paste a picture that illustrates the term. List the common terms, provide incomplete analogies, discuss it, and then Pictionary. So here are some just ideas, ways for you to build some more vocabulary. Through the 6-step process, you have multiple ways for you to be able to teach vocabulary to your students. And you don't have to do this every day, but when you are introducing new vocabulary terms, and especially ones that are not very common, that tier 3 terminology that is content specific, this is where these type of strategies, the 6-step process, could really come in handy. And then use graphic organizers. Find hundreds of templates on this website. So if you click on this, you'll find a ton of templates that you can use, and you should save that or bookmark that page because there's tons of them. Graphic organizers are oftentimes referred to as thinking maps. Students process their thoughts on these organizers to visualize what they have learned. So again, that helps increase the rigor. When they can think through it, they can demonstrate it in a process, whether you're using a bubble map or a process map or timeline, however, whatever kind of template or graphic organizer you use. This really helps the students think through the process. Okay, number 6, have students participate in structured conversations. Why are structured conversations so important in the classroom? Explain how this is scaffolding and a way to build conversational skills in inquiry skills and confidence. Sorry, I'm trying to look for these comments. So we had a lot of great comments on this one. The importance of structured conversations and student discussion cannot be underestimated or undervalued. So here, I'm going to read a bunch of comments from teachers, from all of y'all, that I thought were really positive in helping us understand why structured conversation is so important. So here, Mr. Ernest says, students learn how to take risks. It builds confidence. They're able to think critically. They use standard formal language. They learn new, more difficult vocabulary and constructions guided by the teacher. Mrs. Pepper says, students need time to internalize the info they get, and structured conversations gives them time to do this. Also, these kinds of conversations help students analyze stories and essays, etc., and think for themselves. For struggling students, it helps them learn from others, so they are called on, they have a chance, when they're called on, they have a chance to answer. So peers teaching peers, giving the students an opportunity to help each other. Some other comments include from Miss Prince. She said, having students participate in structured-based conversations can be a way to have student-based learning in classrooms. And again, that's a huge one as well. That's a huge point, that it is student-centered. So instead of being a teacher-centered activity, by giving them an opportunity to discuss what you're talking about, you take the focus from you to the students, and it becomes a student-centered activity. Mrs. Joss says, activation of students' cognitive skills starts with the activation of their social skills. It provides students with a way to start conversations or pull someone else into the conversation. They also help with language learners, and that's a huge one too. For our language learners and even just our struggling students, having structured conversations with their peers, like other people said, it helps them take risks. And for our students who are learning language, this is a great opportunity for them to not to be so singled out, but also to be able to speak a little bit more freely in a non-threatening environment. Mrs. Hanks said structured conversations are important in classrooms because most students want to take rabbit trails that will take the conversation to somewhere else than where you want it to go. Having a game plan, a lesson plan mapped out before entering into a learning opportunity can help guide students where you want them to go. So instead of the conversation trailing off somewhere else, it also, by having the structured conversations, you help keep them focused on the content that you're learning. Coach McClung says, it is important to do this because they will bring new ideas, opinions, and methods to the classroom setting. So by giving them the opportunity to discuss it, they can also expand upon it. And again, that's more rigor. The more deeply that they think about the content or the discussion or the conversation that you're having, then they have more opportunity to come up with more ideas. And that's part of the analysis and evaluation thinking levels. Mrs. Baker says structured conversations allow students to explore the concepts and test their understanding of the material. It gives them an opportunity to build their confidence in a non-threatening environment and address any questions or misconceptions in a way that will not adversely affect their grade. And I think that that's really important too. So taking a risk, asking questions that they may not ask in an open group, and being able to clarify their own understanding. And we know sometimes when a student is struggling, sometimes another student can explain it better than we can. They can explain it in their own words or maybe in a way that we hadn't thought of that they can reach another learner. So the structured conversations gives them another opportunity to do that. Coach Davis said they also have the opportunity for peer assistance when necessary in a small group setting, which is less intimidating. So again, you're creating that safe environment. They can ask questions, they can ask their peers and not feel embarrassed or threatened because they don't understand. Coach Garrett Evans said, having them talk requires them to have a higher understanding of the topic as well as build confidence about the topic. So when they can have that structured conversation, they learn more, they understand it more deeply, and they can demonstrate that through a discussion or conversation that they have. Coach Robinson Evans said, structured conversations allow students to be exposed to academic vocabulary. And again, that's part of the holding them with the sentence stems and the structured conversation. You're giving them an opportunity to demonstrate, to use that academic vocabulary and demonstrate that they know how to do it as well. And so it creates that more exposure. Coach Q says structured conversations are so important to students and teachers. Having a structured conversation helps students become more proficient writers. So again, we link back at their thinking process. The more that they can think, the more they can speak, converse, complete sentences, then they can also use that in their writing. The only writing exposure students get now is via text message, and the way that we text into today's society is far from academic language. Having students actually respond in a complete sentence in class could transition to better writing, speaking, and listening skills. So a lot of great comments and reflections about the purpose of structured conversations, and I really hope that a lot of you will take this idea, that use this strategy in your classroom as a student-centered activity that you can do that's going to help them build their confidence, build their academic vocabulary, use the sentence stem, etc., really great things that happen as a result of the structured conversation. So QSSA is a structured conversation strategy. This is question, signal, share, provide stems, and then assess. So asking students to talk with each other using specific language about a clearly defined topic is called structured conversations. Okay, and our last one, having students participate in structured reading and writing activities. So similar to structured conversation, it is equally important to structure reading and writing. And we've seen this in this presentation. Everything should be purposeful. Everything that you have them read, everything that you have them do. One of the Coach West commented on that. He said on page 49 of the Seidlitz book, it explained all reading activities should be purpose-driven. In other words, we should be able to answer this question, why am I having my students read this? And this was one of his responses to how was the reading and writing, the structured reading and writing modeled in this presentation. So structured activities are intentionally prepared. Students read and think about certain content, then write about it. This rigorous activity provides opportunities for deeper thinking and comprehension. So this was the quick check and a minimum of 80 words, explain how structured reading and writing was used in this presentation. And look to, if you think about some of the reflections that I had you write, I put in a specific word count because I wanted you to get deeper reflection thoughts. I wanted deeper thinking, and I wanted you to be able to demonstrate that through more than writing just one or two sentences. And that's why I always put 80, 100, 150. This is a strategy that you could use as well, that is part of the structured writing process, is that you're getting them to think a little bit deeper than just the basic level thought process that could be. Because we could say, well, I had to read and answer questions. Well, that was, yes, duh. There's so much more to it. And so thinking through the process is one of the reasons why I put through 80 words or 100 words or 150 words, so that you would think through it and give a little bit more of a deeper response. And this is one way that one activity that you could do, one strategy with your students to get them to think a little bit more deeply and demonstrate it. So here, if you clicked on this link, there's a ton of tips and ideas for structured reading activities. And here we come to the end of the presentation. So you should have been able to answer the essential question, what are best practice research-based strategies that I should be using in my classroom to be a highly effective teacher who delivers authentic, superior instruction to my students? Talk about major takeaways. I really appreciated a lot of the reflections here. You talked about grading processes. You talked about how to increase literacy. You talked about vocabulary. You talked about timing. You talked about authentic feedback and parent contact. So many great things here that you took away. So I appreciate everybody's participation in this presentation. I know that everybody has a lot of things going on, but when we're thinking about ways that we can increase our pedagogical skills, we're not just increasing them for ourselves, we're making it easier for ourselves so that when we become more efficient in what we're doing and delivering that authentic instruction, we're having great results and we're becoming great master teachers. Thank you very much.